Thank you, John. Welcome to our City Council work meeting tonight for October 22nd. We're going to start with the first hour, just by way, the first hour tonight, we're going to do our first kind of budget discussion, just laying the framework for next summer budget and the whole process coming up. So let's do that from 5 to 6, then we'll go into the other three items. So, but before that, we'll do the other items. 1.1, any other changes or comments on the agenda tonight? Okay. Any future agenda items? Is Jared on with us? John, you see Jared on? Okay. Then any discussion of future citizen recognition? Okay. Seeing none, we will go right into 2.1 then. Nathan, we'll do our kickoff budget discussion until 6 o'clock.
All right, so if you'll recall, for those who've been on council a little bit longer, just be Sherry. I think my very first budget meeting, I get here and watching staff and I keep thinking, we're gonna have a work session, talk to council, and we did. The night we expected you to approve the budget. So last time we went through very rigorous process with what we're doing in each budget. So that's kind of coming. And I said then my goal was to try and bring back like the larger policy discussion even earlier before we got to that point. So that's what we're talking about here. It's kind of a high level policy. I don't expect to say, yes, do this or that. It's one of the concerns I always have is that we make decisions in a vacuum. It's trying to make sure that we have the whole universe in front of us before we start talking. So when you do it, and at the end of this, Trevor has a model. I don't know if we'll be able to show it, but we're working on a model that we can make changes live and see if you did this, this is what it would look like in the budget. So we've been working on that. Thanks Copilot for creating this image. We don't actually put gold in our roads, but it feels like it when you see the bids and things that we get nowadays. Things are cost. I actually had a gold plated playground structure, but I didn't want to pick on parks. They've gone from say $30,000 for a basic structure. It's like $90,000 for that same thing now in the last say 10 to 15 years. So it's how do we maintain a sustainable budget? So what we want to do tonight is talk about some just basic truths so we don't have to talk about, well, we want you to think this. Then discuss levels of service, the concepts behind that. And I've grayed out the capital projects. We're not going to talk about that tonight. We will talk about that in December. I'm going to show you a picture of it, but we don't need to talk. I just want, again, to start to keep things all in perspective, and we'll come back and talk specifically about those then. So just some basics. My staff know I love this quote. There's no money, John Steinbeck said, there's no money and not enough money. That's how men measure money. We're in the not enough money. This is not a no money discussion. I will show you a report card. I asked staff to do some things, and I asked them if you lost revenue or resource, what would it look like? It caused a bit of a panic. So I'm not saying that. I just want you to be thinking if it happened, or if you had more, what does it look like? So we're in the not enough money side. I think human beings, that's where most people hope to be. Revenue growth is not a given. We cannot anticipate that we will always have revenue growth. We have to be mindful of that. We are going to capture more of our sales tax leakage. That difference, we had a study done 2 years ago now by Zions. It showed about 3.9 million of sales that are occurring from our residents in other places, the tax that would come here. Even if we caught 100% of that, it wouldn't put us in the never having to worry about how much money we had. So, and property tax is fixed. Once growth stops, the growth we see in property tax is because of new businesses, new homes. Unless you're the state and you float the rate, but that's here nor there. Technology, we are looking at that. How do we make it to leverage the resources we have? It can be costly to implement and to keep. Tends to be cheaper than people, but it's not free. And then my favorite, the unknowns from the legislature, unfunded mandates. They will happen regardless of what we do. We are going to have those. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small. Sometimes they say you can do it with existing staff, and then the next statement is you better hire somebody, which we are dealing with our privacy issues, the privacy data the state's rules on that, so. Just kind of thinking, I think as staff, we feel like we're in this circle all the time with these different pressure points that happens, that people's expectations, they want something, and so it pushes into the service. So how do we do that? Well, we need staff, facilities, there's things. So then we talk about revenue, which then makes people mad. So then we talk, well, we'll decrease the service, and then we run back into this, hey, this is not meeting our expectations, and we go through a loop. Every community I have worked in 26 years has this same kind of pressures all the time. It's just, usually in front of you are like one specific group wanting something. I would like a swimming pool. People come in and hit, and that's all in front of you, and if we do it in a vacuum, that's what we see, but knowing, hey, a swimming pool is gonna buy about $2 million a year to operate, let alone building it. How do we fund that? So it's making sure that we always keep all the stuff in mind and not doing it. I think council's done a pretty good job of that. We're staff trying to make sure that we don't put you in a, here's the vacuum decision kind of thing. And we're gonna see pressures as a city simply from growth, but the state law changes, we'll talk about one that's changed that's kind of impacting us. Our demographics could change, aging, younger, whatever that looks like. And then geography. I mean, that is, we're kind of a strange shape. And it's hard for police who are gonna be down on by Porter Rockwell to realistically respond all the way up into Olympia in any sort of timely fashion. So we have to look, how do we base those resources so they can do that. And so we just got to find this balance. And the one thing so as we discussed tonight, these pressures, they change all the time. So we may come up with a solution today, but it's not necessarily going to be fixed forever. So this is something I anticipate council's having to talk about forever. It's just, and it's not good or bad, it's just what it is. Just like you do with your own budget. You might have a plan to do something, you're going to go on a trip and then the car needs tires, right? It's just something happens. The kids need braces. There's something that just happens that you didn't always plan on. There's not a simple fix other than just to keep talking about it. And I do want to point out, there's a limit to how much you can tax. So this is not, please don't take this as, hey, we're setting up, we should raise taxes. There is a limit. Conversely, there's also a limit to how much you can do with what you have. So our streets department right now is doing some analytical work to see how many miles a truck, a specific truck, can plow in an hour. What's realistic for that piece of equipment? Because as we gain streets every year, it becomes harder, but a truck can only do so much, no matter, we're not talking about drivers, we're talking about a physical piece of equipment. Eric is trying to get that, and I think that's an interesting thing to study. So we say, okay, what does it really look like? So, kind of a basic overview. This is off the 2025 budget. And actually, I looked at a bunch of them. The ratios are pretty similar every year. This one's going up a little bit because they gave us some more money, but in the general fund, 53%. Anywhere from 50 to 55% of your general fund in a year is sales tax, your revenue. B and C roads is the next biggest one. That is restricted to roads. It's a restricted revenue. Our energy tax, and then you have your charges for services and property tax down here is pretty small for the general fund. It's a little over $1 million, but that's kind of your revenue breakdown. HPD, about 93% of their revenues are the property tax. They do have some charges for services. The biggest one is the SRO contract we have where the schools pay a portion of that officer. And then there's grants and things, which is where the other 2% come from. And so far, property tax is 100% fire operationally. There are also impact fees in there, but I didn't talk about those. Those are specific to other things. On the expense side, general fund, between 50 and 55% are personnel, so it's a little over 50% of your personnel costs.
Same as taxes, that's funny.
Yeah, interesting that is. But that's about how many we have, and our operating is pretty large. Those don't total up because there's some other, you've got some transfers and some things, and but those are your two biggest expenses. PD, much more personnel heavy than, when I look at the general fund with parks and some of their equipment and streets with their equipment. Your personnel and your equipment in PD is not as much, so it's much more personnel heavy. You see that at 83%. And right now, fire's just whatever UFA is charging us. So it's kind of, they're not our employees, they are a contractor, so 100% is their fee. We do have the building going on, and that will start to play into that, but for intents purposes, it's building or it's a contract. We're not dealing with the personnel costs on that directly. This is kind of an interesting one we've talked quite a bit about. While the general fund doesn't get much from the property tax, certainly police and fire do. And I borrowed this from Kyle's, if you remember this. One of the things we have that's quite different is we have mostly residential with just a little bit of commercial and real. We're working on that, trying to get more commercial properties, but that's kind of our challenge. You'll see most of the other cities have bigger orange blocks. So I had Trevor do some work on it, and so just for the general funds portion, you'll see it's like 8% is commercial. So it'd be nice to get those. We are working to get more commercial in, but what we don't have are like the big office buildings that you see, like a Draper or certainly, Draper's got a lot of large corporate buildings. Some of these others have large, expensive commercial or industrial buildings that change that dynamic. So ours will change over time, but it's probably never going to look like those. We just don't have as much commercial space as they do. Sales tax. So we did this based off this is what we get per capita, but divided by the population portion, which is statewide sales versus direct sales. So those have all been increasing. You'll see we had a big jump here, and it's kind of the rule of large numbers. As you get larger, you can't have the same percent. When we added $1 million in revenue down here, it really bumped us. But now that it's in there, it doesn't bump you up the same, right? Because it's on a larger number. So we do anticipate that this kind of flattens. There is no guarantee, as if other communities grow faster than us, this could decrease over time. We're seeing that some of the larger, more mature cities, I guess, older cities, your more established cities like Sandy, they're actually seeing decreases in their property and their sales tax. They still have a lot of direct, but I think a lot of it's this population piece is starting to come down for them as they start to bleed off population. So what does Harriman's future look like? So we have about 12,000 new home entitlements and existing MDAs. Number kind of bounces around a little bit. We're really trying to come down to what the exact number, but for this, figure 12.
How many do we have right now?
We're at 19,000, almost 20, 19,700, something like that. So those are all entitled. They could be built. Don't know exactly when those are going to be built. We have several models that we use for our population projection, and we have a kind of, hey, some of these properties that are left don't develop, or they develop at very, very low density. You're probably more like 32,000 to 37,000 homes is what we think, somewhere in there, probably in the middle. I actually think it's probably closer to the 32, 33.
I don't mean to interrupt your flow, but it's interesting if we have about 20,000, because when we met with the garbage district, they service just a little under 11,000, so that would be 9,000 of them are in HOA settings. So is that what that means?
Probably our apartments units, because those are housing units.
Okay.
And so you could have one contract for an apartment unit that could have bunch.
But it would be interesting, cause in an HOA or an apartment complex unit, we're not responsible for a lot of that maintenance, the road maintenance and things like that. So if all this new 12,000, it'll be interesting how much of that goes into HOA and how that really affects our budget discussions as we move forward.
Yeah, it's one of the things we're looking at is like how many public miles of street are we adding in a year? Cause Olympia's big, there's gonna be a lot, but a lot of those streets are going to be private. There are some major public roads in there as well, and so that's one of the things we have to kind of tease out each time as we model, what do we think it looks like? So, again, these are real guesstimates at this point.
Yeah.
Build out population, I know you've seen numbers, I got here, we had numbers that were like 170 and so, I don't think that's realistic. The housing size in Utah has been decreasing, not as much as the rest of the United States, but it's still on a downward trend. So our pessimistic view is it's somewhere between 90 and 115. What did the master plans use most recently, do you remember?
116 and
116
change,
and change. So around that, we think we're gonna be, that's our master plan. So that changes quite a bit when we were talking about some of our facilities plans in the past and looking at, we're gonna need stuff for 150,000 people versus 115,000 people.
Yeah.
The parks, master plan, all those things are impacted by this. So we're trying to use one solid number. 116 is pretty close. Again, in 30 years, these are guesstimates. Somebody could say they were way off or they were close. We think we're gonna be in the ball. It's not going to be 150. It's more likely to be closer to 115. So that's my guess. I will say that I guessed the BYU score exactly on the city thing. So right now I'm feeling pretty good. It's gonna be between here.
Did you pick the right team?
I did. There were only a few blue markers on there, but I did it. I was exactly correct.
We're using some smarter modeling. We did have some modifiers before, but with Trevor and you, we've got some, I think, some better modeling.
I think we're closer, and it will depend. There's a lot of factors that go in. Utah County has a larger household population than we do. We have a larger one than, say, Salt Lake, and so we're trying to make some guesstimates on how we're doing this. And so when we met with the state, or was it the Ken Gardner group, we showed them what we were doing, and then they tried to hire him from me, so I'm not letting him go any more field trips with them. But that's how we. So that's kind of where we anticipate that's our population build out. And again, this is a factor of how many homes are actually built and what those percentages are, but you're gonna be closer, you're gonna be in between these numbers than you will be to those old master plans we used to do.
Yeah.
That were really high. And the nice thing, our boundaries are pretty much set. I mean, there's potential, maybe there's some stuff that happens around the high country area, but that's pretty low. It's developed mostly. If it's not developed, it's still 5 acre or 1 acre parcels. It's not a real dense thing, so I don't know that it would skew our numbers much. We're not talking a lot of homes up in there. So I think that's good for us to know, right? It's not this, we have no idea what's gonna happen and we'll be 160,000 before we know it. I think it's a respectable size. I get a sense, I shouldn't say it out loud, but sometimes there's like a race to be the biggest city and people kind of, some of the others I sit in the meetings like, well, we're gonna have more than you, and it's like, I don't really care. Come out, I just wanna be able to service the ones I have.
Were these numbers like pulled before, because we had that large chunk of land that annexed into Sojo that we included as part of our master plan?
So
These
some of
were
that
after.
included some of those numbers, but I think even then it was that's when you were like at 170. It was really high. And that property, we probably, most of it for us was industrial.
Yeah.
And so we didn't
There was some
project a
housing.
lot of housing in there. You'll see a lot more I mean, South Jordan's going to see a lot more housing in there than we do, or than what we would anticipate if it had come into Harriman.
Okay.
So we're not gonna spend a whole lot of time on this chart, we'll talk about it in there, but you'll see this is a 5-year total of what's facing the city. Now, some of that is bond funding, it's through the utilities. There's just some big projects, a lot of it. So when I got here, we were doing this capital planning year by year. I think some of you remember, or if you were engaged, you saw that they would have a spreadsheet you would pick, and then the next year's new spreadsheet would come, but the projects you didn't fund last time, they may or may not be on that same list. So we're trying to do a longer range. We actually have a 10-year, but 5 years is probably really where we're working on, is what projects do we anticipate that we can actually do? So right now, engineering's going through kind of an exercise is what's realistic, given the staff size we have, the consultants we can hire for some of these projects. How fast can we really do them? And that's gonna push some of them out just because we can't get to them, right? And so we are looking at this. Again, it was grayed out. I don't want to spend too much time on it. That's our fire station. So this would be a police building based off of a quote we had, or a high-level guesstimate from a contractor not too long ago. It's a very high-level guess. So whatever we do, just all these things are interconnected. It really doesn't matter how they're funded. They are connected. And so I would just say that the sky's not falling, we just have set priorities. So I wanted to talk about some of the challenges you're going to see on a staffing level that we're gonna have to address in the future. So this is more, and then we'll talk about what it could mean to level of services. Emergency management, HB 48, created a wildland urban interface discussion on housing, going into the urban interface, insurance. It puts some things onto cities to do. We are growing fast enough that eventually we need somebody full-time in emergency management. Right now, it is Commander Adamson in VA down in police, but it's starting to take significantly more time. We need somebody to help us manage our open space from fire mitigation, so we're rapidly approaching that. I put 1 to 4 years, but my guess is it's more like 1 to 2. We have to have somebody. It's just, we've now grown to a spot as a city, we have to focus on it. And this mandate from the state is really pushing some of my concern on how do we do that.
We talked about that in municipal council the other day. A lot of the cities are having to deal with that.
Yeah, it could be pretty impactful on our residents. And then just some general statements, you know, as we grow, you need more police officers. Part of that is this geography and distance we talked about. It's hard. Population, connectivity to other communities. The criminals don't all live here. We have our own, and we send them to other communities sometimes, and other communities come here. It is a free market in crime. I look at Cody laughing because we do have, we're a cul-de-sac, we talked about that. But sometimes the things that come here are because it's quiet, right? They come out here to do something, bad actors, and then we have to chase them all over the valley. So just something to think about. We will need that. But then I come to an issue is where do I put them? When we formed the city, we didn't really, we had a substation with a larger department that did a lot of the central services, so now we have to figure that out. Parks. So we're gonna add the athletic complex, History Park, Panorama Park, Jackson Park, South Hills Park. There's always pressure to add more trails. Not realistic to do that with our existing staff. So at the end, I'm gonna give you a scorecard, and I'll explain it. A report card that the staff put together. Streets, same thing. As we add those public roads, how do we take care of them? And so we're going through an exercise right now on the plowing because we're getting rapidly to a point where we can't maintain it the way we have. Right? We don't have enough equipment, don't have enough drivers, unless we burn them out completely, which is not helpful, causes morale. So we're working on that. Stormwater, same thing. As you add these new streets, they all have catch basins, which have to be inspected and monitored. And so it's just, again, cleaned regularly, something we have to deal with. That growth does come with its own revenues, right? But we just have to figure out how we allocate those. These are pressures we will feel. Water, same thing. The more human-built things you put in the ground, the more likelihood something is going to break, right? They're just, even if they're new, we are seeing breaks in some of our the service lines that are coming in that aren't that old, because there were new materials that should last forever, and guess what? They don't. So we're having to deal with that. So again, water. And then every time I talk about adding a piece of equipment, I need you to come look at our fleet building. And it's 2 garages that we do a lot of our work outside because these trucks don't fit. So we're kind of just operating on borrowed time. So as those other functions grow, then you put your pressures on your human resource, your finance, your IT, those central services that are internally. And then as population grows, you have pressure, and those other departments also put pressure for like legal, GIS, facilities. I probably could have put in either one. Records, both police and our records, we deal with a lot more record requests than we used to. I think the police are doing like 150 a month or something like that.
About 140, 150 a month.
Which is a lot. Events in the city, you just have more people, more things. Facility wise, like I said, we can't really grow. I would say our public works building was designed for a community of about 20,000. We're about 65, so we are just a little bit past where we would need to be in order to house the people that we need to. This is the Parks building.
A little squishy over there.
It's I don't know who else is in there, but it's like a double wide modular. It's very, I know IT loves the nearest restroom is the one over by the rodeo grounds. There are no restroom facilities in any of these buildings we built. No comment
We
about
don't want them to
that.
stay there.
Okay, and again, police headquarters, one of the things, we have an evidence room. We didn't build one with that. We need to deal with that. We are looking at substations potentially with our fires, the 2 new fire stations we're talking here, in order so the officers don't have to come all the way back here to do things. So we're trying to, so that hopefully there's things we're doing will shrink some of the needs for these big buildings, but we still need some things. And then we've been talking about, we're leasing space for animal control, that we would reuse Station 103. That is in process. I think that buys us 20, 25 years, and I figure that group of taxpayers can decide what they want to do. Fire stations, so we're rebuilding Station 103. We have 2 dedicated. I think just given the growth in geography, we'll need 2 additional. We have identified those locations. I'm hoping that's all we need because they're about $3 million a year to operate. So building was one thing, operating them, again, UFA, they actually give us pretty good, I think a decent deal. It's probably cheaper than if we were doing it ourselves. But we do have to think about that. If we have 2 new ones, you're talking another 6 million operations. And we've talked about that before when we did their increases last time. We've been modeling that, but we think those 2 stations, hopefully, kind of they're running north-south quadrants of the city, and we can cover ourselves that build out with 4. So one of the things we're trying to do is come up with a grading system and a level of service. There's like this big one at the department. How is IT doing? Not to pick on Scott, he's not here. So, but then there's within that, how are they doing on cybersecurity, right? There's a specific thing, or how are streets doing on overall, and how are they doing on snowplow? So for us right now, we've been thinking at that high level, and I do have a report card here that I asked the department using this very simplified ABCDF scale because we're all familiar with that. I didn't give them a ton of time. I wanted their just gut feedback on how they're doing at that department level, so. But our level of service is gonna be constrained by just our staffing capacity, how much money is actually available for things. There is a limit, the facilities we have and the equipment that's available, so.
What is your staffing capacity limited by, just budget?
Well, what I look at is how many people I have today, what can they do? There is a point, so when you look at it and say, okay, as we were talking about with the snowplow. So I have a truck that will plow X number of miles. I need a driver for it. If I don't have enough drivers, then the limitation is the personnel. If I have more drivers than trucks, then it's the equipment. So we're just looking at those, it's at some point, is there somebody to do the job? Do they have the equipment to be able to do the job? Or is it something we have to do we're gonna have to make an investment in the future? So that's when I look at that. Facilities is, I could add a bunch of people or try to add a bunch of people at Public Works. I just don't know where we would park their vehicles or where they would come to rest. Their break room is already full. I guess we could kick another group out, and every time we use one of the bays as a break room. So that means all that equipment now is outside, and so it's a challenge.
Kick the police.
Kick the police out.
Yeah,
It's
we
fine.
have too many spaces.
They do have space out there, so. So this is one way we did it, and this is, I'm gonna give you a report card in a second that we did and just talk through it, but this is what, this was the standard they used. And then, Wendy, working with her best buddy Chat, we started coming up with this. So what we're looking for is, at least on the level of service, how comfortable are you with this concept, that's how we're gonna try and start analyzing our budget, is where are we at? How are we doing? Both at the department level, but also at specific tasks. That's my goal, is eventually get us there as staff, so we can say, well, we think we're here. One of the challenges, we say, well, we could reduce level of service. That's where we have said, well, what does that actually look like? If you say, okay, we're out of money, what does that look like? And that was my intent. So I asked everybody a series of questions. So this is a big report card that we have to. And if you see if there are two letters, it's because two different people graded that department.
There's a lot of advocates on here.
I know what you're digging if you've done that Krispy Kreme, I'm sorry.
And I can make this available to others if they want. But so was that kind of interesting? An observation is that the lower level of supervisor, the one doing the day-to-day, was more likely to rank it lower than people a little higher up. So, again, perspective. A lot of these we have a solid C plus, not quite a C plus average. So we would still be eligible for something if we were in school. You see a few that have 3, it meant there were grades. Again, we have, police gave themselves an A minus. If we were able to do a lot, we've been pretty good. That's one of those teetering ones where we have to watch our triggers that we put in to check it, to try and keep that up. Someday it may not be possible to afford that level. We'll have to, that'll be a discussion, ongoing discussion. I think the ones who ranked themselves the lowest was Parks in their ability to keep up. Right? They feel really, really behind. C minus and a D plus. So showing my age, when he sent me a D plus, I was thinking Tommy boy, because they don't get that grade out very often. But
Kind of like the discussion last council meeting though about, should we kick this money into that or this, because we haven't been able to get this done.
they just don't have enough bodies really for the growth in the community and the demands on the parks. IT feels kind of stretched, right? They gave themselves a C plus. There's a back page. I printed on there. Finance, I think hopefully one of the things, and I took some of the notes, this is not everything I said, I just took the things that resonated with me. But several of them say the reason they've been able to keep it up is because additional hours have been put in by just individual employees, working their Fridays off, their Saturdays, into the evenings to try and keep up. And so, how do we, that's not realistic long-term. There are times when stuff happens during the budget, we might feel super busy, but it's not realistic to expect that of somebody long-term. They'll burn out, they'll leave. So, I think that's one of the things so this, again, I didn't give people a whole lot of time. I wanted their gut reaction. They're not far off from where I thought. I think I may have fallen into the boss's mode that I was probably just slightly higher. I didn't give Parks a D+, I didn't give them a C-, but
So in some of this,
I just know you're struggling to keep there.
so in some of this, I mean, quite a few of it says staff resources, staffing shortage. Do we have allocations for staff? Are they not filled? Do we need more allocations? Is that?
Mostly we're at where we're at. They're full. You do have some turnover in some of those positions. We try to backfill with seasonals in parks. So, think about it. Weed issues and that's very heavy during the summer, not so much in the winter. If we have a winter like this last winter, there's not a whole lot of snow removal. If we go 2 years back, we had a lot of snow removal that they help on. And so your seasonals, they're helpful. And Anthony could probably tell you, seasonals are great, but they tend to need to be with somebody who a little bit more experienced, who knows what they're doing. And when you start to spread them too thin, you just don't get the level, you don't get the return that you would. But employees are expensive. Full-time employees are expensive. So, we look at IT, there are 3 of them. That's hard when they go on vacation. If somebody's gone, we can be pretty thin in those departments. And everything is becoming more computer dependent. Everything we do. The recorder, and we just added staff there because the state's mandate on privacy. If you read the fiscal part of the bill, it's gonna have very little impact. Once the state auditor came out and started pushing, this is what you're gonna do, it was, you need a full-time person dedicated to this. So I don't know if it didn't cost the state that much, but for local governments, everyone I've talked to, it's a challenge. Same with emergency management. So yeah, if we can, I don't think we have any that are just sitting with empty allocations. We do have, like, facilities, should be on here. We do have a frozen position in there that at some point we're gonna have to fill. We froze that just to kind of get our feet under us and figure out where we were going.
Water's the only one that has allocations that aren't filled.
Are those ones we froze?
Right.
And that was, if you remember, that's part of your rate discussion that we'll also have a little bit later, is that was all part of that. How do we go? And we do some analysis to see how we track versus other communities our size. For X number of water connections, how many staff do they have? And, if they're really low and really high, I want to ask them, how are they so much more efficient? So then you find out they're just understaffed. Or if they have a lot of employees, then you think, or if you're the one with the most employees, you got to wonder, what are we doing wrong? If others, so that's how we use that. It's not, I don't like to use it, well, they have this, so we should have it. We just try to use it to see, how do we compare? Are we being realistic in our expectations for staff?
And then that comes to the level of service Harriman wants to provide, or a national standard of acceptance of level of service. What does that look like?
So I will say that those are harder to define because they tend to be by, like, programmatic element, like how are your parks? They're not necessarily talking about, and they might be talking about how many parks you have or what are the play structures like. So trying to find that, there are some departments that have some national standards we could go out and grab. There are others that would be harder to find that. And so when we did this one, that's why we were trying to find, well, this is just some basic thoughts. Are we meeting expectations? But we did do this one where it's a little bit more in depth, saying, okay, we're trying to do this. I think you tend to be able to recognize cities that move in this area.
Yeah.
When you visit. And you frankly recognize these cities. It's really expensive to stay all the way up here, but I mean, personal as you should be here, but there's always a cost to that. So what is the reason? How do you do it? And that may not mean that every single task you do is at an A or B level. There may be some that you're doing what the state requires you to do. So that's kind of where I think as we roll out a budget for you, we're gonna try and say, here's where we think this gets us level of service wise.
It's funny because the report we'll talk about today, the parks report, kind of talks about being in the B column, well-maintained parks, and then it talks about feeling like we're slipping into that basic green maintenance, we're slipping a little bit from B to C, some of the survey stuff.
Yeah.
Not just parks specifically, I just bring that up because it was in the surveys, and I'm sure
Well,
if you
and see-
surveyed each individual thing, it would be the same type of feeling. We used to have, perfect snow plowing, and I still think we do, but I'm sure it's slipped because of exactly that. So many more roads added, and we just can't keep up.
But it even shows, staff feels that same way, like they feel that slipping.
And I think, like I said, it was interesting, the way people graded themselves. Again, I gave them like 3 days. You just tell me from your gut what you think. And, a lot were like, I think we do okay. But a lot of them were like, I think we're meeting the expectations. If we had more, we would do this, but we can get by. And there were some, like, we're struggling with what we have, parks being one. If we're seeing this slip, it's because it really is probably a staffing issue over time. And we'll talk about it during that.
I think too, Nathan, sorry, for some of these departments, they're much more heavily viewed. Their perception of them is completely different.
Impacts people differently.
Yeah, so people look at parks and they want them to be clean and pristine, never anything wrong, and no hand soap dispensers kicked off the wall like we see every weekend. So I think that has an impact too.
For sure.
And I will, from a feeling of public safety, right? So when we talk about public safety, we almost always go police and fire, but if you define it as how safe do people feel, these play a huge role in that,
Yeah.
right? And if they're clean, if they go in and there's graffiti everywhere in the bathroom all the time, it gives you a sense. Like I said, if you've been to a city like that, you're like, if you know, you know, right? It's like, I don't like that. So some of these things really are, and Wendy's exactly right, some are much more public facing than some of our other functions.
I think, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think if you think about sitting in this chair many years ago versus now, what you're talking about at the beginning, I think we started talking a lot about calculating O&M and these things because we never calculated any of that. It was like, well, here's this cost, but we never calculated the ongoing maintenance and cost of service of those kind of things. And I'm grateful that you're putting that into action, saying we have to get our hands around really understanding the cost to maintain these things. And that way, when new things come on, that's just part of this calculation and it's just rolled into it.
I was talking to a city manager in another community not to be named, and they said they just opened a new facility. And they didn't have one before like this, but nobody thought about what the utilities would cost
Exactly.
in a brand new 30,000 square foot building, or what your janitorial costs would be. And so those are important things, because often we get focused on how do we build it without how do you live in it.
Like
And so-
the cool arts thing we'd build it, it's like, oh yeah, that's great initially, and then every year, who's gonna pay for that O&M on it?
It was only $2 million a year operate. I don't know where that comes from. So it's that, so this is kind of that big picture. This is how we're starting to look. I don't know that so there is a budgeting methodology out there called, is it priority-based budgeting? They keep changing their name. They used to be budgeting for outcomes, it's not a priority-based. The concept is you look at a programmatic level and say, okay, how much money does it cost to do snow plow? And everything's ranked and you put money towards those programs and then that rolls up into a budget. I have done that. It's an extreme amount of work to get there. I think we're gonna go kind of partway there without going all the way there because it required a lot of work to get there, a lot of work to stay there. And frankly, when I left, I think they went back to this is too much work. It was helpful for that community because the question was always, well, how much do we spend? It kept coming up, well, how much does it take to fix that road? So they wanted a number. So when we gave them a maintenance number, they knew how many miles we were doing, how many. So there can be some value to it, but it is a huge lift to get there. And there's a company that has trademarked it, so I have to use their software. And it's really cool.
I do love that you also have a lot of people still here that have a lot of institutional knowledge because they've been here a long time through all of the different levels of budget discussions and stuff. And they're still here, meaning that they're signing on to this way of doing it, so I'm grateful for that
So,
too.
And this will be an iterative process. Like I said, we're always gonna talk, so at our next one, we'll talk through the capital without actually saying, we'll show it to you, we'll show you where we think things are at. And then as we move into like actual budget, we'll probably come to you and say, here's what we're proposing after these conversations. No longer in a vacuum. Are you good with this? What do you wanna do? Do you wanna move some things? Because ours is going to be, it's that staff level. Here it meets some metric and we stick it in. And then you look at it and you know, maybe politically, this street, you ranked it here, but this street's more important to the community. Maybe not from an engineering standpoint, but to the feel of the community.
Talking about Gina Rhoda.
That was moving forward. But yeah, that's the kind of project where it's like, well, we would rank it this way.
Right.
It's the one thing I would say, staff, we're gonna give you kind of the policy direction you've already given us. That's where we take our stand. And so we say, well, we want to change it. Okay. You don't hurt our feelings because we're trying to implement what you've already done, but you all get to change those. That's not really our role. Our role is to try and make it work. So this is the way we're gonna do this.
It's like when the police do their reports using the program, but then they still have to look at it because they have to give their human touch to it. Same, right? You can do the program, but these guys have got the human touch to it.
Yeah, so we'll bring forward, so I'm recommending we use this little simplified version. We can use the other one as staff, but just for conversations at the council level, just go back to grade school,
Love it.
A, B, C, D. Originally I put this up, I didn't plan on minuses and pluses, but that's what I got, so I think I will say that most of my kids went to schools in Oregon where they only did the solid grades, and I was like, you don't have minuses? No, really. You guys don't know what it's like. We walked up to school uphill too.
85 is an A now, so
I know.
just saying.
So we'll use this and again, as we talk, we'll try and say, just because something's an A doesn't mean we say, hey, you should cut it. We just want to know, we think we can do this really well with the resources we have. If we're at a C, it's probably because we're saying, we don't think we have the resources to go beyond this. This is about what we can do. I think we would want to have conversations if we're at an F, like or D or F, like, we really struggle here. But there could be a time when you say, man, we're in an A, but that's a state mandate that we should just do the basic, right? So that would be more your role. That's not always like huge, but I find that more effective from a policy standpoint than just saying cut 10% or add 10%, because that across the board stuff doesn't take in all the nuances that everybody's trying to do within their budget and their operations. So this is what I'm proposing, and on our next, we'll talk about capital. I haven't decided if this works in capital or not, but we just need to, here are the projects that we think we have to build. And some of these bigger ones are in there, like the police station and Public Works. But that's a big number. 193 million, almost 194 million.
Our general fund hits that about every year, right?
Jeez.
I would, yeah, that would be,
I think we're in the wrong area. This is the county budget, right?
Too soon.
No, it's, yeah.
and for the record, we are not proposing anything like that. Please do not.
I'm gonna get calls.
Do not, no, this is just what it is. And again, some of this was because we had never done it before. We put the projects in there, we pushed them in, and then we started looking at it, I wonder if this is realistic. And one of the challenges we're seeing is some of these projects take longer to get going, and we don't have enough engineers or people to manage. I think it was, you wrote about Public Works, that you just didn't have enough people to manage some of the bigger projects. It's a pretty flat organization, and so you get tapped out with people who can manage a project, and so the other projects have to sit.
Sure.
And that's something we're looking at, not saying, hey, you need more, but that's what we're having to say, what is a realistic, how much can we put through? We're also finding that the consultants that we use sometimes are also busy. And so what, in my mind, shouldn't take that long, seems to
Forever.
take forever. You know, when you design a water tank and the next tank's the exact same size, seems like all you have to do is the geotechnical work and see if it fits, but that's not the way it works. So I am not an engineer, so if I designed it, it might fall down, but that's the way I would look at it. It's like, well, I already designed it once, I just need to make sure the foundation works, and away we go.
Common sense. Go
But
away from
that's not the way it works, and so those are the kinds of projects that we see really push, and then some of our bigger street projects, some of these projects are not ours, they're being done by developers, but they still require our staff to inspect and to look at it, and so. Yeah, so we looked at, well, here's the ones, I think what happened the first time is we looked at, here's the projects we are going to do. And we forgot about these development-driven ones that they're doing, but require our inspectors and our stuff to go through. That all of a sudden it's like, wow, there's a lot of projects going on. We're building how many millions of dollars in roads out in Olympia that are funded by the state and some grants that we're inspecting, but I mean, they weren't originally on the list. They made it on the list because they're happening.
Yeah.
So we have to manage them, but it's not necessarily our money. So this isn't all city, but it is all taxpayer money, but some of it is grant money from the state. So we co-opted the rest of the state to help us pay for it.
Right.
Or the feds on
Some of it, yeah.
the water project that we're doing. It's just proven to me that taking federal grant money is never
With the
It's
strings.
never worth it. But Kyle agrees. It's
We
never-
will get our reimbursement in 2030 if we're lucky, at the rate we're going.
They are, it is the,
And,
the shutdown ends?
well, actually, the EPA just barely got furloughed. Like, they sent me more questions, and then 3 hours later, I got an email saying they were being furloughed, and they wouldn't be back until the appropriations continue.
we got that, it was like a $3.2 million grant, and you're like, okay, that much money is probably worth the headache.
Yeah.
I am starting to think that's not true anymore. We need inflation, it needs to probably be 10 million to be worth their headache, because it
Terrible.
is, takes a lot of time and it's just stupid.
Especially in Old Town.
It's been just an unending request for information is what it's, I'm gonna put words in Kyle's mouth, but that's what it feels like. Every time we submit it, you shout, oh, that's great, can you do it? But maybe put a slightly different twist on it. Okay, so can you go back to the original? So, I don't know.
Well,
It's
it's
just,
very true.
it's about the way they work. So this is our next meeting, we'll actually give you the details behind this. So I won't put it up on the board because it would be a true eye chart, but we'll just have them, we'll kind of walk through.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna break them out in the same way, and then we'll have the funding source next to it. sort of by that, so, I'm trying to think of how to do it. I could just do it by fund. You'll have it, it'll all be in front of you, but it is quite the eye chart, when you go through it, so. And we will focus more on these years than this year, cause this is stuff that we've already done or are in process, but and this should be happening. So we're really moving out, and we'll have to pick up the other year. So, any other questions or guidance you wanna, this was just really kind of here's our initial budget, start thinking about it, and I go back to my favorite. Maybe I'll go back in time, that one, it feels like it. It does feel like that's what everything we're doing just costs so much money now. And this was not meant to pick on the streets. But.
Well, it's water, that's water.
It's
Fixing holes.
anything we do just costs a ton, so, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Finished on time. That was good. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, we'll go to 2.2, update on parks, trails, and open space master plan. Anthony?
Okay, thank you.
Our C+.
Or C plus.
D plus.
C minus.
Barely passing. But no, as you most probably know, we started updating our Parks, Trail, and Open Space Master Plan earlier this year. Throughout the summer, we've been working on some public outreach pieces of that. We had a booth at Town Days. We've conducted some focus group interviews and a survey, a general survey to the public. Tonight, we're gonna focus on the outcome and results of that survey. Tonight, we have Kyrene with Y2 Analytics here with us to go over that. We also have Lisa Benson with Landmark Design, who is our consultant on the master plan update. She's here virtually with us as well. But we'll just turn the time over to Kyrene real quick to go over the results of that survey, and then we can have some discussion after, if you'd like.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
Do I have a clicker tonight, or are you gonna just move along for me again?
I put it up there.
Okay, I'll go grab it, thank you.
Is it the same as the planning commission?
Yes, yeah, same one, thank you. While he's pulling that up, I will just go ahead and preface this by saying that we got a really good response from the community on this survey. We were really pleased with the level of participation and engagement. Harriman residents are very enthusiastic about their parks and trails and open spaces. And so we'll dive in here, and I will try not to have anyone's eyes glaze over too much when we start talking stats. But high level key findings. Overall quality of life has been really consistent since we've been conducting these surveys in Harriman. We're at an average of 77 on that 0 to 100 quality of life scale. Again, pretty steady with this, with the results from the same survey we conducted, or a similar survey in 2019. What we do see is that our longer term residents are more likely to express slightly lower quality of life ratings, largely just because the community has changed over time. So no real surprises there. We have seen an uptick in park use overall among residents. Frequent park use has gone up. More than half of residents say that they are visiting parks a few times a month or more often. And then we have slightly fewer residents who say that they are using trails a few times a month or more often. But we also have fewer residents saying they're not using trails at all. So just more moderated trail use and more frequent park use is kind of the trend that we're seeing right now. Overall, residents are satisfied with the amount of recreational amenities that are available to them in the city. The things that they would really prioritize when it comes to future funding or investment in the parks and recreation space tends to be focused on maintenance and upgrades for those existing amenities. Some of the things that stand out include increased trail mileage or connectivity, ways to make trails a little bit more accessible through neighborhoods, and then trees, shade structures, and restrooms in both parks and at trailheads. We also asked residents a series of questions about events and arts and cultural opportunities in the city. We have a relatively small share of residents who are aware of the Harriman Arts Council or the activities that the Arts Council sponsors. So there's certainly some room to grow awareness and engagement there. But we did have a lot of residents report participating in various city events, including more than half of residents saying that they attended Harriman Town or Fort Harriman Town Days. So lots of popularity there. And then again, when we're thinking about budget priorities, future investment really hinges on existing amenities and additional investment there. I will quickly, survey methodology, we had a total of 609 residents participate in the survey, which was in the field for about 3 weeks. So again, really positive response rate there, especially when we're fielding a survey in July. We worry a little bit about the holidays sort of cramping our style there, but residents were very engaged. And as always, the survey responses have been weighted to be as reflective as possible of the underlying demographics of the city. So jumping right in here, in 2019, our average quality of life rating was at a 78. Our average rating this year is at a 77.2. This is statistical noise, that's the same number. And you can see from the distribution of quality of life ratings here, we have very few residents who gave the city what we would call a failing quality of life grade. So yeah, if we're thinking about that D+ student, we're at that 50. And that is the largest sort of dissatisfied group of folks. We don't see a lot of people sticking around and saying that they're unhappy here, which is good news. But again, when we look at the amount of time that residents have spent in the city, it is directly correlated with their quality of life ratings. So those residents who have been here for more than 10 years, who have seen the most change in the community, seen traffic increase and population growth and all of those things, they're slightly less satisfied with their overall quality of life. Still a 74 on that 0 to 100 scale is pretty positive. And this is fairly comparable to what we see in your neighboring cities as well. So no real cause for concern in terms of residents' overall perceptions of the city.
Erin, can I just interrupt on that
Yes.
slide? The previous, yeah, that
Yes.
one. This was one of my biggest concerns about doing the survey this year, about doing this plan this year, was because the traffic was so terrible. And we were getting so many complaints, I thought this score was going to just plummet. I was shocked that it was as high as it was.
That's good. And it's worth noting that when we asked residents why they gave the rating they did, traffic was a common concern. It was a complaint that came up, but even when we're looking at those residents who mentioned traffic or the concerns that they have about the community, our standard ratings there are in the 70 to 75 range. And then we have a few residents, a handful there, who are pointing to the level of growth and development and again, just the changing character of the community that's caused some frustration for them. So getting into specifics on parks, again, more than half of residents say that they're using parks in the city a few times a month or more often, and that is up about 10 percentage points from when we conducted this survey in 2019. Again, overall, just participation and engagement with parks and recreational amenities in the city are quite high. And we find that residents generally agree that the city provides an adequate amount of recreational opportunities, parks, open spaces, trails, and amenities. And a total of about 2/3 of residents, 69%, agree with that sentiment. Pretty comparable, although slightly smaller share than what we had in 2019. Our margin of error is 4 percentage points in either direction, so we're right on the cusp of statistical significance there. But not a lot of dissent to that sentiment either. So our share of residents who disagree, who would say that there need to be more amenities, is holding constant. No real cause for concern again. When we ask residents what motivates them to visit the parks that they prefer and how much they value having parks close to their house, we see this is an area where public opinion is largely consistent. Residents identify having parks close by as one of the top reasons that they visit their favorite parks. And 80% of residents say that it is at least very important to have parks close to their homes. This is a huge factor in residents' quality of life. We broke the city out into park regions to make it a little bit easier for residents to digest the visual aids and identify the parks that they're visiting most frequently. All of those slides with the regional breakouts are included in an appendix to this report, just for the sake of time. But most residents are visiting parks in the central region of the city, and the parks in the north side of the city are also quite popular. Overall, most popular Harriman parks would be Butterfield and Jalen Crane, but you can see at 17% and 16%, we're only looking at about a third of residents using those parks most frequently. So there is a lot of distribution in terms of the parks that residents prefer in the city. The features that are the most important to residents, again, being close to home is a big driver or motivator for why residents frequent their favorite park. Pathways and trails, special features, things like splash pads, are also drivers for residents. And then sports fields and courts as well. Pickleball will come up many times in the open-ended results of this survey and anytime we gave respondents an opportunity to answer in that vein. When we ask residents what improvements or changes they would make to their preferred parks, they most often said trees or additional shade structures. Again, the survey was in the field in July, so important to keep in mind. That would be a particularly brutal time for sun and heat, and residents looking to escape that. But maintenance and cleanliness and restrooms were also frequently requested investments or upgrades. And then the next most common improvement is that their favorite park doesn't need improvements. So a lot of satisfaction, again, here with city parks and recreational amenities generally. Looking at trails specifically, again, just about half of residents report using trails in the city a few times a month or more often. This is down slightly, but we have also seen an uptick in residents using trails a few times a year or once a month or so. We also asked residents how important it was to them to have trails within walking distance of their home, and it's slightly less of a priority than having parks nearby, but we do have 69% of residents who say that it is very important or extremely important to them. When we look at the types of trails that residents interact with and might like to see more of in the city, we find that the largest share of residents, the plurality, say that the city has room to increase a little bit of the asphalt trails, but in total 70% would like to see some degree of increase there in those asphalt trail miles. Concrete trails, if we're thinking about just sidewalks and pathways, the majority of residents feel that there are a sufficient amount. And then our natural surface trails, I think, is the most interesting division there. We're basically split in thirds, with residents who would like to see a large increase in the number of natural surface trails, and the share of residents who would like to see some increase, and those who think that there are probably enough of those. So we certainly have a constituency in the city that feels the trails we have are adequate. We don't necessarily need any more regardless of the type. But if the city were to invest in additional trail mileage or looking at expanding the trail network, natural surface trails or asphalt trails would be the most popular options there. Again, regional trail use, we have trails in the central as the most popular location, but then the south rather than the north of the city, where north we have more park use, trails more in the south makes sense when you think about the locations. Rose Creek Trail and then other urban trails were identified as our most commonly used trails in the city, followed by Midas Creek, Juniper Canyon, and Eric's Trail. Definitely more consistency here, so there are trails that residents identify as their most favored, a little bit more coherence or cohesiveness there compared to the very wide distribution of favorite park use or most frequent park use. When we look at the things that residents are doing on trails and how they're engaging with trails specifically, most of them are using it for walking or jogging. And then recreational biking is also quite common. So again, thinking about the types of trails that residents might like to see more of an investment in, those asphalt trails or natural surface trails make sense with the way residents are using and would prefer to use trails in the city. Potential improvements to the trails, overall just more connectivity. Residents would like to see trails be more complete or connected, see them linked with the neighborhoods, or just increase trail miles generally. Those top three priorities are so similar that I think it is a pretty clear priority for residents overall. Then restrooms and pet waste disposal stations, also in that set of priorities. And then connecting trails to parks, rounding out that top five. Again, pretty clear standard preference there. Residents' attitudes about arts and culture and events in the city. So again, more than half of residents who responded to the survey reported attending Fort Terriman Town Days. So really positive engagement there. Nearly half of residents say that they attended the food truck roundup. Pretty good awareness and participation across the board here. We also asked residents what types of events they would be interested in seeing in the future. More outdoor concerts and performances, markets and vendor fairs, and family-friendly festivals, rounding out the top three. You can see a pretty widely distributed list of interest in future events though. So lots of opportunity to get creative there and engage various groups of residents. Only about a third of residents say that they have heard of the Friends of Harriman Arts Council, and only about 3% of residents who responded to the survey overall said that they participate in Arts Council events monthly or more often. So definitely room to increase awareness and engagement there. When we look at specific event attendance, overall the most popular was the summer musical theater production at 13% of residents who say that they attended that event. So again, not a lot of engagement or awareness in that space. We have about 8 out of 10 residents who said that they didn't participate in any arts events in the city. And a lot of that, when we look at residents' open-ended responses, comes down to just a lack of awareness of those opportunities. That said, we have about 2/3 of residents who feel that there are enough arts and cultural events in the city, that the city does a good job addressing those needs. And we have about 46% of residents, not quite half, who would agree that cultural and arts events and opportunities for those events in the community would be improved by having a community arts center. A large share of residents in that neutral zone neither agree nor disagree with that sentiment. So certainly not a top priority for residents when we're thinking about budget allocation going forward, but there is some interest there, not a lot of dissent. And speaking of investment priorities a little bit more specifically, we asked residents for this list of amenities, facilities, etc., how they would like to see the Parks and Recreation Department allocate budget or think about investments in the future. Whether they would like to see more of that amenity, so investing in new builds, maintaining or upgrading the existing options, or we allowed a don't know option here as well. You can see the bulk of the responses for all of these categories focus on maintaining or upgrading the existing amenities within each category. The one area where we have two areas where we have fewer than half of residents who say that they would prefer to see maintenance and upgrades is landscaping and shade and athletic fields and courts. So 43% would like to see additional landscaping improvements, shade structures, and just over a third, 37% total of residents, feel that there's room for more athletic fields and courts. Again, pickleball frequently mentioned.
Shocking.
We also had residents participate in a hypothetical budget allocation activity here. So thinking about the Parks and Recreation budget and future investments within this space, what things might residents like to see a hypothetical $100 allocated to? Mostly this is to help us identify how residents prioritize different investment opportunities in the future, whether they would put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. So given a limited set of resources, the things that rise to the top of the list of priorities here are walking and biking trails, where we have just shy of $18 on average allocated to that category, and then about $15 allocated to parks and playgrounds. After that, we have a little bit of a drop off there, so $11 on average allocated to athletic fields for games and practice, $10 to large natural open spaces, and then we fall below that double-digit mark after that. So lots of interest in just additional trail miles. That's a pretty consistent theme we see throughout the survey. Pretty substantial interest that has gone up compared to the average budget allocation in 2019 in investments in parks and playgrounds, and then athletic fields for games and practice. So certainly some youth and family friendly focus here when we're thinking about programming and potential investment in future amenities. We also asked residents how they would feel about specific special use parks or facilities. So we had this set of options for residents to consider, and they were allowed to select up to 3 of these options. As you can see, we have about a third of residents selecting most of these options. So there's a lot of interest across the board in these facilities. Climbing park at the top of the list there, but also a lot of interest in a fishing pond or a disc golf course. About a quarter of residents would be interested in seeing a new all abilities park or adaptive recreation trails. And then just shy of 1 in 4 residents would be interested in an additional dog park in the city. Urban demonstration farm, about 1 in 5 residents. So again, a lot of interest across the board. I would fall back on most residents are more interested in the city investing in maintaining and upgrade existing amenities. These are seen as sort of potential icing on the cake, not necessarily the highest priorities that residents expressed. Similarly, special use facilities, lots of interest in an outdoor amphitheater or pickleball courts specifically. After that, we see a pretty dramatic jump to lower priority or lower interest in a nature education center. And that concludes our whirlwind tour of the survey data this evening. Any immediate questions we can answer?
How is our response rate compared to response rates you do for other types of city surveys?
Good question.
That is a great question. I do think this particular survey, I was very pleasantly surprised that we were able to get this level of engagement in the middle of the summer especially. So we typically see response rates for city-sponsored surveys around 10 to 15% if we're looking at a topic that residents are really highly engaged with and we know we have good contact information. If we are sending out a survey where the sponsor is just Y2 and we don't have the city logo behind us, just for context, we would expect to get about a 2 to 3% response rate. So this level of engagement, we had about a 12% response rate overall. We were really, really pleased to see that.
And where did the contact information come from?
Registered voter file. Yes. And then we supplemented with additional address-based sampling purchased from a USPS list vendor so that we could cover some of those multifamily units and just areas where we have less voter registration.
Did the questions change from 2019 very much?
Anywhere where we have a direct comparison, we maintained comparability as much as possible, so not a lot of difference in question wording or response options there.
When you said you needed to weight some of them, like, were there any categories that you had to significantly weight?
I would have to look back at that specifically, but I don't believe so. We weighted our responses based on age, gender, and home ownership primarily, and that usually helps bring most of the other demographics about into line with what we would expect. I think our largest weight was applied to home ownership just because we do tend to get lower response rates from renters.
I see. Thank you.
And we're 83% homeownership on responses, so that's pretty.
Any other questions? All right, thank you all so much for your time.
Easy, I guess.
We'll be back in a couple months with, I guess, the entirety of the master plan to, present that to you guys. Yeah, I think that's it for now.
I appreciate it.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thanks for being here tonight.
My pleasure.
So for me, there wasn't too many seniors involved or that responded, but definitely only 2% of people using our senior stuff. It seems like we get more activity than that, but because it's always full or filling up, so.
I know it's,
And it's not
Yeah, I know.
consistent either, like
No,
the
true,
senior
yeah.
programs aren't consistent yet, so
That's true,
that'll take
yeah.
some time.
Yeah, because they usually just going off the board in front, like when's the next one?
Yeah.
And then Harriman, Friends of Harriman has some advertising to do.
That's my biggest take.
Getting some.
Okay, well, thank you, Anthony. Okay, we'll go to 2.3, continued discussion regarding the vacation of the asphalt trail near States at Rose Creek. Bryce.
Okay, so as the title kind of said there, this is a continuation from our meeting a few weeks ago when we originally discussed this option. So I'll kind of run through the intro a little quicker than I normally would, but we'll still kind of run through it for general public consumption. So the area that we're talking about is just north of 134th and just west of 5600 West or Rosecrest Road. There's a commercial development on that corner. We go west and kind of get into residential, so that's the area that we're talking about. We'll zoom in a little bit here. So here's that commercial corner that we're talking about. Some Vasa's here, KFC, car wash. And then we get into the residential area over here. So this trail that's highlighted here is the trail that's been petitioned to have the city vacate. As a reminder, the petition was signed by almost all of the residents along the trail, on each side of the trail, in favor of vacating it. And I should mention, Adam Jacobson is the one that submitted the petition, is here if we want to, ask any update questions or anything.
I also brought Melissa Murray, she's my neighbor down the street, that, we had a variety of people that were interested, but because of, the time of year, or this week, with everybody being gone, there wasn't a lot of people who could attend, but I know we're not supposed to talk, so.
So again, the primary reasons that the petition was submitted was for safety, security, improper use of the trail, and a lack of use of the trail is kind of the main reasons that the petition was submitted. It is part of a larger system. If you look, they're kind of disconnected, but there's a trail on the north side of the neighborhood that connects all the way from Pioneer Street over to 5600 West or Rosecrest Road. There's a small connection that would connect here, then you'd have to kind of offset and come down here. And so vicinity and background, that's kind of where we're talking about. Again, the background, this was dedicated with the subdivision to the west of the trail when it was built. It started out actually as a dirt trail, mostly for equestrian use. A few years after that, it was paved into an urban trail, an asphalt trail. And then, yeah, that's the.
Was the trail to the north in the same situation? Was it?
I
asphalt
believe
now?
so, yeah, I believe they all went through that process. So here are some of the pictures that were submitted. I forgot to mention, one of the concerns was lack of maintenance of the area, and kind of an eyesore for the residents there, so. And then this was the original petition, like I mentioned, the majority of the neighborhood along the trail, I should mention, signed in favor of vacating the trail. So, updates since the last meeting, there were some questions asked by council that, to kind of better inform the situation and what it would take to vacate the trail. So, Todd, our city attorney, looked into what we could do as far as a city on vacating the trail. Would it need to be split right down the middle? In some road cases, that's the case, or could it all go to one side? So he determined that this council does have the flexibility to split it down the middle or do it all to one side. That's an option either way. And then the other question that was asked was, okay, what would it take to actually go through with vacating the trail? As far as, you know, the actual process of getting it recorded with the county and the cost associated. So, I will say there's two options for vacating, and this is an updated number from the staff report. And these are both kind of, I won't say worst case scenario, but the most costly situations, which is if the council chose to move forward with vacation, splitting it down the middle, that creates more work than if we did it to one side. It cuts the parcels in half that you're impacting, right? Because you're only doing it to one side.
Sorry, is this per lot or is it total cost?
Yeah, this is total cost. So there's two options, which this is the cleaner and recommended way if we did go that is plat amendments. It's easier, so a plat is the original subdivision, right? And then they divide the lots on the plat. So if I go back to that where the trail was dedicated, we go back and we update the original plat to say this trail's going away, we're adding it to the lots. It's a much cleaner way for future reference and being able to look at it, but it is more expensive than the second option, which is cutting the trail into individual pieces and just doing deeds to each individual lot.
Been text notices, right? Because this would these each have their own separate parcel number at that point?
Yes, so that would be, yes, the deed itself, if we did the individual quitclaim deed, those would be individuals.
But if
you did the plat, you can combine it with the original parcel. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it's pro or a con, a plat amendment requires every signature that's impacted. So essentially you'd have to have everyone sign the plat before any vacation could occur. If it's an individual quitclaim deed, you do not need that. We could, you know, it would be individually deeded to each property owner.
So then I have a question for Adam. How come there's two people in there that said no? What was their reasoning?
One person one person liked it. One person liked it because they could drive their car down and do their yard maintenance through the trail, which isn't allowed anyway, but that's why he liked it.
Another person just liked it because he uses it?
He just liked it. I've never seen him use it. He's my back door neighbor.
Okay, thank you.
And then there's another one that didn't sign it. He doesn't maintain his yard, and I don't even know if he lives there anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there were
Actually three. There's two no's and one I could not get a hold of.
One no response,
Oh,
right?
some third none.
And I will say, so again, we are looking at, and I'll go all the way back to kind of the overall map again. So this petition was asked of the residents right along the trail, right? The question was asked, what's our requirement? If we did go to a vacation, a public hearing, what's our noticing requirement? I believe it's 300-foot radius from this. That won't get very far. It'll essentially get the homes that have already signed the petition and then maybe across the street on each side and these homes. But it won't be getting kind of the west side of the neighborhood. Now, that's the minimum requirement. We could, if the council chose to proceed, we could increase that radius and try to capture the whole neighborhood, because it might impact, you know, someone living here that might not get notified. So that's a potential. Right now, most of the feedback that we've heard, obviously, is from right adjacent to the trail because they receive the most impact.
Do all of those streets have sidewalks and Freeman?
Yes,
Yeah.
Freeman subdivision stuff.
Yes.
So there is still access, like if they took that north trail, they came down that little tiny trail, they could access 134th off the sidewalk, it would just not be straight shot through there.
Yeah, so the best way would be to come to this Freeman Lane, because if they came down here, they'd have to essentially come back down here or come down.
Most people, and I know I'm not supposed to speak, but just so it's not on this plan, it's hard to see. There's a detention pond at the bottom of the cul-de-sac right by the fizz, and most people
Walk out
walk out that way, because that's where they're going, to be honest. Most of them are going to the fizz area,
Or to the gym.
or to the gym.
Yeah.
the reason why, and Melissa and I wanted to just share briefly is, there is some use on that trail, but most of it is kids that just wanna hang out behind your house. And so it's kind of weird that it's more like loitering type of use, not like I'm actually using the trail.
You just turned into your dad.
Get off my lawn. It does feel like that, and
When you have like 10, like everyone's dogs are just barking for an hour because there's teenagers hanging out there. It's like, okay, guys, please just leave.
and they just walk back and forth between the houses, so like they'll hang out behind my trees and then go down. And a lot of it's because it's so narrow, that's really the only people that use it.
Private confined.
It's private, confined, narrow,
Nice.
some of it's
Great
fenced,
location
it's
for
shaded.
teenagers.
And then the maintenance on top of that, so it does seem, I mean, we've before talked about possibly petitioning to say, make a crossing across 134 to actually tie in the trail, so it did make sense. But that would be a signal, that road's very wide,
Yeah.
it will widen more, so that's why we're proposing to give. And we all had gates to that trail. About half of those people have actually changed their fence out and closed off their gate.
Are we at risk for losing that trail on 134th?
Which one?
On the going
The
east and
asphalt
west?
trail on the south.
Yeah.
Oh, down here?
Yeah.
No, it's right up against the fence line, so we're looking at kind of future widening of
Yeah.
134th. We are planning on putting both on the north and on the south, an 8-foot asphalt trail on the far edge of each.
Okay, it's an equestrian trail though, that one they're showing.
No, I know
across
that,
the
yeah,
whole
yeah,
area.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just an equestrian trail.
But it's still a trail.
Right, do you have any more? Cause I think really what we just need to know from you, do you want us to move through the process?
Yes.
I would say that's what I think the residents all deserve a voice over there. I think that's what, talking like, I think doesn't mean we're going through with it, but I think we get the feedback from everybody over there. We explain the whole process to an open house, notice it and just go from there and get feedback from the whole neighborhood. 'Cause I do think it is, but it is beyond, I know the direct impact is here,
The
but I
16
think there's
homes, yeah.
other in the neighborhood that are impacted by it, and I'd like to hear their thoughts on it before we move forward. Just that's my first initial blush is, let's take it to an open house and see, and then go from there.
I'd be comfortable with that.
Again, I wanna go beyond the 300 feet too, I would like to
Right,
go,
notice
I
the
would
whole
like to cover
neighborhood.
the Freeman.
Since you are gonna notice it though, I do, it would make sense to me to share which way you're going. Are you going 50% split or all?
Oh, I don't even think that is, I don't know if we can even look at that yet. I don't know if it would make sense. My view, Mayor, would be going to where it was platted from, the original plat. But that's just me.
Which would make it just go to one side.
Yeah, and I will say both of these costs would come down in that case because it would be essentially one plat amendment and 9 individual deeds instead of 18.
And that's I would go to one side too, that way it's, cause then you're digging a post hole and you're putting a fence post in the middle of a trail if we move that way, right? Then you're
Right.
middle of a trail where if you.
But it makes sense that the original property was that original plat, was that, to me. What do you think?
That was kind of our initial thoughts too.
I don't know, but for purpose of public noticing, it's just like, is the trail gonna be there?
Yeah, it's just it's a yes or no on the trail vacating, yeah. And then the semantics behind it would be.
The only reason I asked that is because when I talked to all the neighbors, they were just curious about that.
Oh, yeah.
But
I don't
most
think we
actually,
cared.
I don't think anybody cared. I think they were concerned with just building the fence down the center
Todd,
of
is there
the
any
asphalt.
any legal ramifications of that as far as, because there's these people back it and these people back it, can you give all of it to these people and none of it to, there's nothing because it was originally platted the other way, it's fair and equitable.
Well, given on how long ago this was dedicated, there's really no restrictions on how it can be split. So like Bryce mentioned, it can be done either way. There's no legal way to do it.
Do you think that there would be a public perception to that though?
Oh, for sure.
That if you're
If we
giving,
go one way or another.
you're giving all
For
to
sure.
these people and not any of these people?
You'll face that for sure. Yeah.
And at this point, I think, whatever you do, I would recommend you do the plat just because it is cleaner and then you're not dealing, you don't end up with a potential of like a sawtooth where one person doesn't want it. Right, it's just done, cleaner in the future when somebody goes back to look, they will pull the plat, they may not pull all these individual deeds, they pull a plat, they'll see it's that way.
Easier when you get your tax analysis, get low to go.
Yeah, exactly.
We are getting several of these requests now, so there have another one, that came to me on the trail that was built. It doesn't connect through, the connecting portion of the trail has not been built. The subdivision was developed around it, there's like a parcel in between that didn't do it, we have right of way there, or we have an easement there for it, just hasn't been built. So, what I'm gonna do is turn that over to engineering to work through the process as well, we can decide. What we're telling most residents is, from a staff perspective, we always say you should keep it, cause so obviously a council at some point said we'd have it, we're bringing it to you if you want to, so we'll work through that process. And the process we're using, if anyways, it's the state's process to vacate, we're using their procedures, which is why we do the hearing and all that. It's not required that way, but we were just trying to find a way to make sure that you heard from the voices who could be impacted. So you do have another one, it's on Fort Pierce.
Yeah, I know, and we've had them in the past too, and that would be another, how much of a nightmare is that to understand the ones that we have and the ones we haven't vacated? Is that like easily accessible or a nightmare?
That's why a plat would be better, cause it goes, when you pull up the plat, it says it's gone.
Yeah, I'm just curious
I can
as
only
far
think
as,
of one,
that, me too,
We did the one at the end of,
where we had that
Fort
weird
Pierce
business
up
on
there,
it.
yeah.
and, then we did the ones out.
The one off
64.
Yeah,
That was
64.
an easement across
And that's where the
individual
plat's different.
property.
Because if you do an easement, it might not be a plat, because it's easier to just release an easement for the document.
Yeah, so I think these are fee title properties we own, so that we'd have to go through a different way.
So when it gets noticed for the public meeting, I'd really like it to be posted on the trail too, and not just sent out to the neighbors, cause I bet there's people who use it who don't live close by at all. So,
I think that's what we did on the one off 6400, we put postings on both ends of the trail.
and like maybe with the online survey, not just a community meeting or like opportunity to get feedback without coming to a
QR
meeting.
code or
Yeah,
something.
QR code, yeah.
Yeah.
Could do that.
Well, some of those, there was one a few years ago that it was part of the subdivision and it just went there and it stuck several years ago, remember, we just vacated
That
it.
was up Port Huron,
Yeah, I just
And we
remember
have-
that we
where they
just,
combined the lots and they had a lot of trail between them.
yeah,
We have some, it tends to be older from that era, that 2004 to 2012 or something timeframe where you got these weird, I think there was a plan
and then
It's
it just didn't work.
on one side, but the other side didn't ever get done, and so we have to decide if we're gonna build it, then we should build it, so
Force it through, yeah.
it's a functional
Yeah.
trail, so people can connect between neighborhoods, cause having lived in the south for a while, you could see the house, but to get to it, you have to walk all the way around, go like 2 miles to get into that subdivision, so there is some value to having connectivity between your
Yeah,
subdivisions.
trail to nowhere,
Um,
that was not, okay,
But we do have some of these trails that, I think the idea was there to connect the neighborhoods, we just haven't finished. They may show up in our master plan that, yes, we should, but if it's like everything else, like the last time we did the master plan, it was $250 million of projects and about $29 million of revenue. So we just have to be realistic that some of these things will not happen.
Yeah. I think it's easier to make the decision though when you see it stubbed and then everything's built on the other side of it, it's not going anywhere. I think it's harder when it is a thoroughfare. So,
There's a change in Utah code a few years ago that you can't use condemnation for trails anymore.
oh, yeah.
That happened about 4 or 5 years ago, so.
Yeah,
So those trails of nowhere, thinking if it's next to future development, that's one thing, but if it's next to existing development, the likelihood of creating that connectivity is gonna be very low.
I agree. And that's the decision we made on the one, remember, it was just like,
Yeah, it
Going
just
nowhere.
dead ended, and I think that's one of the things we look at, like I said, the other one that has come to us just this, in the last week, there isn't a trail there's some grade separation, so we'll have to, there are some challenges, which is probably why, I think, if I look at the county plats originally, they probably anticipated a road going through their cabin trail or whatever that is. It was gonna go straight through and then it never did, and houses got built in the way, so that'll just be another one will be coming. Bryce is super excited, because I'm gonna hand it over to him and he can delegate it out to somebody else.
I don't think cabin trails, we've talked about it before in the past, probably like 2015 or 2016.
Yeah, it's a
We
weird
our
road.
resolution, so it'd be good to close that one out.
The cabin trail comes to a cul-de-sac and then extends through. It's a county right-of-way that's really functioning like a private road for the two houses that are there to the back of their lots. It's just strange. It's the hangover from the county did some things, and when they were doing the planning at that time, they didn't clean it up. So that's a weird one. So it's not a trail, but it may be coming to
I
us.
think that there's some valid points in that, and I think we discussed that a little bit in our survey stuff that we saw today as far as maintenance. It's like, it's like valid point, well, it doesn't get maintained, and it's like, well, then how do we make sure that we make these things on our maintenance schedule to get done? Can we even keep them maintained? So that has to be probably a component of the decision too, is do we have more than we can actually maintain? Even though we like the connectivity of it. Well, I just think it has to be part of the overall discussion for sure. Cause I think there should be an expectation. I think connectivity is good. I think the one on 6400, I think I voted no on that, cause I always feel strong about these trails and the connections. But then back to the reality of it. But I also believe that it sends a message that I would rather it be split 50-50 on both sides, because then it's fair, it's the city-owned, it's taxpayer-owned property, and so if you're gonna split it, it feels like it should be split equitably between everybody who backs it, but I can understand the argument on the other side too, but that's premature, I think, the way you go with what you said.
Okay, to summarize, we will plan on conducting a public open house to kind of get more feedback from the broader region, posting it at the trail as well as mailers and notifications going out.
Is it vacated as is? The city hasn't approved any of that. That's up to the people that have
Yeah, we would
property.
likely put that in there.
So
We
they
wouldn't have to
move
rip
their
that
fence,
asphalt.
it would be up to them to move their fences, that kind of thing.
And then you have the question
Yeah.
of, what do you do
Time
if they don't?
Yeah.
Yeah, which could be
Maybe
even
bond for it.
more of an eyesore.
Well,
Let's have those discussions with residents. That work? They're good, Adam?
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, I'll look forward to that.
thanks, Bryce.
You got enough time, Kyle? We good?
It's up to you guys. I can get through my presentation for sure, just beyond
See you guys.
the amount of discussion.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for getting.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Everybody's looking at me. So I'm here tonight to discuss water rates, everyone's favorite topic, maybe after property taxes. For once, I actually have some not so bad information, which is good. So what I'd like to discuss tonight is we will review the previous rate study that was done and the recommendations that were made in that. Review the fiscal year 2025 financial performance of the water fund, and then review what staff's rate recommendation is for a potential increase, and of course, that is up to the city council to decide. So what I am looking for from the city council tonight is what information do you need to make a final decision on a water rate increase? And then we will go through, once we go through the numbers, are there other scenarios you would like staff to calculate for that discussion that would give you a full understanding so you can make an informed decision on a potential rate increase? So first is, just go over the water rate history a little bit. So in March of '24, the city council did adopt the fee rate study recommendations once we went through a full water rate study. Highlights of that included yearly water rate increases in bonding, just as a reminder, the water rates previous to this study had not kept up with inflation. We did have another study done. However, it had assumed a low period of inflation and did not include any potential capital projects. And as all we remember, during the pandemic, that's really when inflation started to really tick up, prices started to increase, the cost of water from Jordan Valley went up, so it certainly surpassed the 2% that was built into that model. So the 5-year recommended rate increases by that study was 16.3% for fiscal year 2025. That was implemented by the council. It was 13%, but just as a reminder, because we had delayed that increase till November of that year, so we weren't putting a large increase on the residents in July. That's why it was 16.3% to make up for those lost months. And then the consultant recommended a 13% increase for both 2026 and 2027, dropping to 9.5 in 2028 and then 3% 2029 and thereafter. That, of course, assumed all the major capital projects were completed that were contemplated in that study, which was backed by a master plan update at the same time. And then one direction council gave staff is to look at the rate model that was put together and compare it with the actual financial performance of the water fund. So this table, it's a little small, I apologize, shows the actual financial performance. This is similar to the one that is in the staff report. From a purely financial standpoint, the drought was great for the water fund. As you can see, that rate revenue was about $2.2 million higher than what we were expecting in the model, and that is largely due to lack of precipitation during the summers. We've all heard, and we heard a few council meetings ago, our public works director and parks director did go over how much water was used during the summer and during the year. We also had non-rate revenue. We did receive interest rates were higher than we were expecting, and we were also expecting more projects to be done, therefore decreasing our cash balance lower, plus interest rates stayed higher than we were anticipating. You will notice the model did assume we would issue $9 million in bonds. The model assumed we were going to start those capital projects that had been discussed with the master plan. Of course, we have not started that yet, and I will go through that a little bit when we go into recommendations. And to credit the water department, they did operate as efficiently as possible, so their operating expenses were lower than what the model assumed, as you can see. And as I mentioned on the capital expenses, we did not start a number of projects that the model had contemplated we would start. So overall, we ended up actually about 5.6 million better than what the model had anticipated we would be at. The model assumed we would have had a dip into our reserves, 1.8 million. We actually ended up about 3.8 million higher than revenue due to that. Just to highlight a couple other things. So in operations, looking at why that variance was so significant at almost 1.7 million. We did have 2 frozen positions, as we had discussed during our levels of service. Those positions, while frozen, were actually still funded. So there was savings there because we did not fill those positions. And then just overall repairs in the system were less than anticipated. Although I will mention as a caution, I did notice towards the end of the fiscal year, the number of unscheduled repairs started ticking up, so.
And it sounds like you expect that to continue.
Yeah, so I didn't want to set the expectation that was going to be a recurring theme, because we have been seeing more repairs that the crews have had to go take care of. And then on capital expenses, as an FYI, you'll actually see this at the next council meeting. We will discuss capital project carryovers. So there's about $7.6 million of projects that are being proposed to be carried forward to the next year. That has been built into the model as an assumption for next year. So this first chart shows if we just kept with what those rate increases the fee schedule had recommended, what would the overall outcome be? And as you can see on the 2029, that last year, we would have approximately 8.1 million available to appropriate, to spend. And that is in addition to what our fund balance reserve recommends, which is a 6-month reserve That's what that 8.9 million is. Below that, I have, once again, those increases that the consultant had recommended. So moving on, so as staff, trying to think like a council member, which sometimes can be scary, and some of our previous discussions, I know one thing the council does like to look at is the more we can even things out for our residents, the better, instead of having these wild swings of increases and decreases. So what this model looks at is we take what available amount we have for appropriation, that 3.5 million, we spread it over the next 4 years, which would be a 6.5% increase over those years, and then by the fiscal year 2029, we would basically be about even, looking at what our recommended reserve is at 8.9 million. So that, of course, there's a multitude of other options. Trevor helped significantly with these rate models. This was the one I had chosen to present tonight, so it is my fault if you don't like it. But other things to consider with different models to possibly scenario is this model assumes that you as a city council will adopt the capital improvement plan that engineering will be proposing in the future. This does match the master plan that the council adopted. It also matches the rate model that was adopted. So it isn't necessarily that we're throwing more capital projects at you, but looking at a higher level, you technically have not adopted these projects yet, and we are putting them in this plan. So more for a transparency there. And then this model does assume that we're going to fully fund that recommended reserve of 6 months of expenditures. So when I looked at the first year in 2026, how much money we had available, I deducted the full 6 months of expenditures. The model assumed it would take a number of years for us to get up to that point. One of the reasons I did that, just kind of my thinking on that was, hopefully last year was a very exceptional year on water usage, and hopefully we aren't put in similar situations moving forward where consumption is just so high due to the lack of precipitation. We might end up needing those reserves to keep the increases more level in the future potentially. We all hope we don't. It's great for a revenue side, but that much water usage is not good for many reasons. And as I said, other alternatives for consideration is just not to fully fund the reserve and maybe stretch it out, which we could potentially lower that rate increase. So with that, this is the time I would like to solicit some feedback, what your thoughts are. Am I going in the right direction? Am I completely off base?
I think you lower the rate increase anyway, because we went from 13 to 6.5 and we just spread it over a longer period of time, so the initial hit is less.
Right.
So I think, in my opinion, you fully fund the reserve and have it there and stick it at 6.5. I think this is good work to me.
And the hope is if we don't hit the model 1 year, we would have enough in reserves to help even that out. So
Yeah.
we hopefully don't have to go back to the residents and say, we said it's gonna be 6.5, but oops, we need to add another 3%. Hopefully, this is assuming we don't have more extreme
Yeah.
years, which,
Water can just do that too.
Yes.
This is the plan, depending on Mother Nature and see what she does, but this looks like a good responsible plan, and if it happens, you have to come back and bump it up, you can kick it down a little bit further.
If you recall, the plan that we had last time that we were replacing didn't have any money. It assumed all capital was coming from growth, but we have infrastructure in the ground that is getting older and starting to break, and they didn't plan on any of that piece. They were looking at it as, hey, this is a fast growing city. Yes, we started 20 plus years ago. We actually should expect a lot more from our water lines. We do the ones in Old Town we're replacing maybe 60s and 70s. So there are some challenges there, but as a line ages, you start to have more and more issues with it. So that's just part of this increase is dealing with the maintenance of our system, so we don't get into a spot where, like in LA Water and Power, where their plan is to replace their water lines every 400 years. It's a great plan, it'll never work, but they do show that plan. I think they dropped it to like 380 recently, so we're making progress.
Oh, that's way more realistic.
So for the rate increases, does that mean like every resident sees 16%, or is it like kind of weighted and then like it's just 16% overall?
So it is, it'd be 6.5% overall, however, it is important to note that we have a tiered rate system, so the more water you use, the more expensive it will be. So for some residents, if they have 1 year they were using less and then all of a sudden they start using more, they may see higher than that 6.5 because they're using more water and hitting those higher tiers.
Okay.
Have we taken in the assumption of our purchasing the water is gonna stay baseline, or does that increase over the?
It increases over time, and that was built in the model.
And this one included us buying more water to avoid
Although Will did do a very good job on the podcast this last week.
He did.
Explaining all that fun stuff.
And that was a component, just as a reminder, especially for the public, that was a component of the last rate increase, was purchasing more water from Jordan Valley.
I think you did a great job, good work.
Thank you.
12 minutes, that was good.
That's good. Okay, did we get through work? We did it. Okay, that'll bring us to the end of our work session. We do not have closed tonight, we decided to push that. We did have one item we were talking about, so we'll push that down the road. So we just need adjournment. Need a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
Okay, second by Tara, all in favor?
Aye.
Think you're ready? Is that in there?